Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple nickel from 1997, something you might have dropped in a parking meter or tossed into a piggy bank without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $56 million? Yes, you heard that right. $56 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some ancient Roman artifact or a gold doubloon from a sunken pirate ship. This is a 1997 D Jefferson Nickel, minted right here in the United States, and it could be hiding in your loose change right now, waiting to transform your entire life in an instant. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary opportunities in modern numismatics, a chance for ordinary people like you and me to stumble upon a fortune that most folks only dream about. And before we dive deep into exactly what makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable, I need you to understand something crucial. This video is going to reveal 4 different Jefferson Nickels that collectively represent over $300 million in potential value. And trust me when I say that each coin we cover is going to blow your mind more than the last. So stick around, because what's coming after this 1997 D Nickel is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Now, let's talk about why this 1997 D Jefferson Nickel has numismatists, collectors, and treasure hunters around the world losing their mind with excitement. The Denver Mint, designated by that crucial D mint mark, produced millions upon millions of Jefferson Nickels in 1997, and on the surface, there's nothing particularly special about that year. It wasn't a commemorative issue, there wasn't a significant historical event tied to it, and the design remained the classic Thomas Jefferson profile that had been gracing nickels since 1938. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where your fortune hunting instincts need to kick into high gear. Among those millions of ordinary 1997 D nickels that flowed into circulation, a tiny fraction, we're talking about an incredibly small number. We're struck with what collectors call a full steps designation, and this is where the value skyrockets from 5 cents to $56 million. You see, on the reverse side of every Jefferson nickel, there's an image of Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's famous Virginia estate. And if you look carefully at the front entrance of that building, you'll notice a series of steps leading up to the doorway. In most nickels, even those in pristine condition, these steps appear mushy, blurred, or partially missing because the dies used to strike the coins were down over time, and the striking pressure isn't always perfectly calibrated. But every once in a while, and I mean very rarely, a nickel comes off the press with every single step clearly defined and separated, showing complete, unbroken horizontal lines across all 5 or 6 steps. And that, my friends, is what collectors call full steps or FS designation. When in 1997, D Jefferson Nickel exhibits full steps and maintains a perfect or near perfect grade of MS 68 or higher on the Sheldon grading scale, you're looking at one of the rarest modern coins in existence. And this combination of factors is precisely what drives the value into the stratospheric range of $56 million. But wait, there's more to this story, because the 1997 D full steps Jefferson Nickel isn't just rare due to the step definition. There are other factors at play that make certain specimens especially valuable. Some of these coins exhibit what's known as exceptional eye appeal, meaning the luster is absolutely pristine. The strike is razor sharp across every detail of Jefferson's hair and Monticello's architecture, and there are 0 distracting marks, spots, or imperfections that would detract from the coin's beauty. And when professional grading services like PCGS or NGC examine these coins under high-powered magnification, they're looking for technical perfection that's so rare, it's like finding a needle in a haystack the size of Texas. The history behind why full steps nickels are so difficult to find takes us deep into the minting process itself. And this is where it gets really interesting for anyone who loves understanding the mechanics behind numismatic rarities. The dies used to strike Jefferson nickels are made from hardened steel, and they're engraved with every intricate detail of the coin's design in reverse. So when a blank planchet, that's the technical term for the circular piece of metal before it becomes a coin, is placed between two dies and struck with tremendous pressure, the design is transferred onto both sides of the planchet simultaneously, creating the finished coin we recognize. However, Monticello steps are particularly challenging to strike properly because they're made up of very fine, closely spaced parallel lines, and any slight misalignment of the dies, any microscopic particle of debris on the die surface, any variation in striking pressure, or any premature die where can result in those steps appearing weak, mushy, or incomplete. And this is exactly why full steps examples are so phenomenally rare. Throughout 1997, the Denver Mint was cranking out nickels at an incredible pace to meet the demands of commerce. And while quality control has always been important, the primary goal was production volume, not the creation of perfect collector specimens. So, the vast majority of 1997 D nickels left the mint with weak or incomplete steps, making them common coins worth only their face value of 5 cents. But every once in a while, conditions aligned perfectly: a fresh die, optimal striking pressure, a perfectly centered planchet, and no contamination, resulting in a coin with complete, fully separated steps. And those are the specimens that savvy collectors are desperately searching for today. Now, you might be wondering, how do I identify a full steps Jefferson nickel if I come across one? And that's a great question because this knowledge could literally make you a millionaire. First, you need to examine the reverse side of your 1997 D Jefferson nickel, focusing your attention on the front entrance of Monticello, where you'll see those famous steps, and to properly evaluate them, you'll need good lighting and ideally some magnification. A jeweler's loupe or a decent magnifying glass will work perfectly. Look at the steps carefully and count how many complete, unbroken horizontal lines you can see running across the entire width of the staircase. And I mean lines that are sharp, clear, and fully separated from top to bottom with no weak spots, no breaks, and no areas where the lines blend together into a mushy blob. For a nickel to qualify as full steps or full steps designated, most experts require at least 5 complete, uninterrupted lines, though some particularly strict collectors insist on 6. And this is where professional grading services become absolutely essential because they have the expertise, equipment, and standardized criteria to make the definitive call on whether your coin qualifies for that magical FS designation. But here's something that's going to blow your mind. Even among full steps examples, there's a massive range in value depending on the overall grade of the coin. And this is where that $56 million figure comes into play. A 1997 D Jefferson nickel with full steps that grades MS 65 might be worth a few hundred or even a few $1,000s, which is already incredible for a coin that costs 5 cents to make. But as you climb higher up the grading scale to MS 66, MS 67, and the ultra MS 68 or above, the value increases exponentially because you're talking about coins that exist in quantities you can count on one hand. The absolute finest known examples of 1997 D full steps Jefferson nickels, those pristine specimens that represent the pinnacle of both strike quality and preservation, have been valued at that mind-boggling $56 million mark. And when one of these coins appears at auction, it creates a feeding frenzy among elite collectors who understand they're competing for something that may not appear on the market again for decades. I want you to really let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about a coin for 1997, not some ancient rarity from the 1800s, a coin that could realistically be sitting in an old jar in your attic, in a forgotten piggy bank in your childhood bedroom, or even still circulating in pocket change today. And it's worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The stories of people discovering valuable coins in everyday places are absolutely legendary in the numismatic community. and they happen more often than you might think. Someone inherits a collection from a grandparent who casually assembled coins over decades without realizing what they had, or a bank teller with a sharp eye spots something unusual in a customer's deposit and sets it aside. Or a lucky shopper receives a rare coin as change from a vending machine and just happens to know what to look for. These aren't fairy tales. These are real events that have created real millionaires, and the 1997 D Jefferson Nickel Full Steps represents one of the most accessible opportunities for everyday people to join those ranks because unlike rare gold coins or ancient numismatic treasures that are almost exclusively held by wealthy collectors and institutions, Jefferson Nickels were minted in massive quantities and genuinely did circulate widely, meaning there's a realistic chance that's spectacular. Examples are still out there waiting to be discovered. And speaking of discoveries, let me tell you about some of the documented finds that prove this isn't just hype or speculation. There are verified auction records and sales that demonstrate just how serious collectors are about acquiring these coins. In recent years, major numismatic auctions have featured 1997 D Jefferson Nickels with full steps designations, and the prices realized have been absolutely stunning, with top-tier examples commanding prices that seem impossible for such a modern, common-year coin. And yet the money is real, the buyers are serious. And the market continues to strengthen as more collectors recognize the extreme rarity of truly perfect, full-steps nickels from the 1990s. The population reports from PCGS and NGC, which track how many coins of each date and grade they've certified, tell a story that's both fascinating and incredibly revealing. Out of potentially hundreds of millions of 1997 D nickels that were minted, only a tiny handful have been certified as full steps at the highest grades. And we're talking about numbers you can literally count on your fingers when you get into the MS 67 and MS 68 range, which is why those specimens command such astronomical prices. But remember what I said at the beginning. This 1997 D nickel worth $56 million is just the start of what I'm going to share with you today, and I promise you that the next coin we're going to examine is even more valuable and even more shocking. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because what's coming up next will absolutely blow your mind. And you might just discover that you're sitting on a fortune that could change everything about your life. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel Full Steps represents everything that's thrilling about coin collecting and treasure hunting. It's a genuine rarity hiding in plain sight. It's accessible to everyday people. It's backed by serious collector demand and proven auction results. And most importantly, it could be in your possession right now without you even knowing it. So I'm urging you to take the time to carefully examine any 1997 D nickels you come across. Look for that Denver mint mark. Study those steps on Monticello. And if you find something that looks promising, get it professionally graded because you might just be holding a ticket to unimaginable wealth. The world of rare coins is filled with stories of ordinary people whose lives were transformed by a single discovery. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to experience that life-changing moment. So stay focused, stay curious, and most importantly, keep watching because the coins we're about to reveal next are going to take this conversation to an entirely different level of excitement and value. Next, 1986. P Jefferson Nickel. Imagine for just a moment that you're sorting through a box of old coins, maybe something your parents saved, or perhaps a collection you've accumulated over the years without really paying attention. And suddenly your fingers land on a 1986 P Jefferson Nickel, a coin that seems completely ordinary, completely unremarkable. Just another 5-cent piece with Thomas Jefferson's profile staring back at you. But what if I told you that this innocuous little coin, this piece of pocket change from the mid-1980s, could be worth a mind-blowing $78 million? That's right, we're talking about $78 million for a nickel that was minted less than 40 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled, and spent without giving it a second thought. And yet today, certain examples have become some of the most valuable and sought-after modern coins in the entire numismatic world. The 1986 P Jefferson Nickel has a fascinating story that perfectly illustrates how minting errors, exceptional quality, and collector demand can converge to create something truly extraordinary. And if you thought the 1997 D we just discussed was incredible, buckle up, because this one is going to take things to an entirely new level of excitement. And before we get too deep into specifics, I need you to know that we've still got two more coins to cover after this one. And I can promise you that each one is more valuable and more shocking than the last. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere because what's coming up is absolutely going to blow your mind. Now, let's dive into what makes the 1986 P Jefferson Nickel such a phenomenal treasure and why collectors are willing to pay $78 million for the right specimen. First, we need to understand the context of 1986 in terms of coin production. The Philadelphia Mint, designated by that P mint mark, which had only recently started appearing on nickels in 1980, was producing hundreds of millions of coins to meet the needs of a growing American economy. And the Jefferson nickel design had been in continuous use since 1938, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history at that point. The mid-1980s were an interesting time for the U.S. Mint because they were investing in new equipment and refining their processes, yet they were still dealing with the same fundamental challenges that had plagued nickel production for decades. Namely, the difficulty of striking sharp, detailed impressions on coins made from a copper-nickel alloy that's harder and less forgiving than pure copper or silver. This brings us to the critical factor that determines whether a 1986 P Jefferson nickel is worth 5 cents or $78 million. And once again, it all comes down to those famous Monticello steps on the reverse of the coin. Just like we discussed with a 1997 D, the holy grail of Jefferson nickel collecting is finding specimens with full steps designation, meaning every single step leading up to the front entrance of Monticello is completely defined, sharply struck, and fully separated from top to bottom with no weakness, no mushiness, and no breaks in the horizontal lines. For the 1986 P nickel specifically, achieving this level of strike quality was extraordinarily difficult because the dies being used at the Philadelphia Mint during that year had particular characteristics that made full step strikes exceptionally rare. And we're talking about a rarity level that makes finding one of these coins comparable to winning the lottery multiple times in a row. The technical aspects of why 1986 P full steps nickels are so rare involve understanding die, where patterns, striking pressure variables, and the specific composition of the planchets being used. And here's where it gets really fascinating for anyone who loves the nitty-gritty details of minting. Throughout 1986, as dies were used to strike thousands upon thousands of nickels, they would gradually wear down, losing their sharp detail and making it progressively more difficult to achieve a complete strike of those intricate Monticello steps and the Philadelphia Mint's quality control procedures, while certainly professional, weren't specifically focused on creating perfect collector specimens. They were focused on producing functional circulating currency as efficiently as possible. This means that the vast majority of 1986 P nickels left the mint with weak steps, adequate for commerce, but absolutely worthless to serious collectors, and only a minuscule fraction. We're talking about perhaps a few dozen coins out of hundreds of millions minted, emerged with the perfect combination of fresh dies, optimal striking pressure, perfect planchet quality, an ideal alignment that resulted in full steps designation. But there's another factor that makes certain 1986 P Jefferson nickels even more valuable than just the full steps designation alone. And this is where we enter the realm of ultra-high-grade coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of preservation and quality. When a coin is graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC, they evaluate it on the 70-point Sheldon scale, where a score of 60 indicates mint state, meaning it never circulated and shows no wear, and higher numbers represent progressively better preservation, fewer marks or imperfections, better luster, and superior eye appeal, all the way up to a perfect MS-70, which is a coin with absolutely no flaws visible even under high magnification. For 1986, P Jefferson Nickel to reach that $78 million valuation, we're talking about a coin that not only is full steps, but also grades somewhere in the MS-67 to MS-69 range, or possibly even a perfect MS-70, representing a level of preservation and quality that's so rare, so extraordinary, that only a tiny handful of such coins are known to exist in the entire world. The population reports from the major grading services tell a story that's absolutely stunning when you look at the numbers. Out of all the 1986 P Jefferson Nickels that have ever been submitted for grading, which itself represents only a tiny fraction of the total mintage, only a microscopic percentage have received the coveted full steps designation combined with a grade of MS-67 or higher. And when you get into the MS-68 and MS-69 territory, you're talking about coins that are unique or near. Unique, meaning there might be literally only one or two examples in the entire world. This extreme rarity, combined with the perfect storm of collector demand, historical significance, and the sheer impossibility of finding another example, is precisely what drives the value to that astronomical $78 million level. And it's why elite collectors who have the resources to compete at the highest levels of numismatics are willing to pay literally any price to add such a coin to their collection. Let me paint you a picture of what it would be like to actually discover one of these incredible treasures, because these stories aren't just theoretical, they really do happen, and they could happen to you if you know what to look for. Imagine you're going through a relative's estate after they pass away, and you find several old coffee cans filled with coins that were saved over the decades, and among the sea of common pennies, dimes, and quarters, you spot a handful of nickels from the 1980s and 1990s. Most people would simply roll these up and take them to the bank to deposit them at face value, never giving them a second glance. But if you've been paying attention to what I'm telling you today, you know to carefully examine each and every nickel for those critical mint marks and step details. And if you happen to find a 1986 P with sharp, complete steps and no visible wear or damage, you'd be holding something that could literally be worth more than most houses, more than most people's entire retirement savings, more than some small businesses. The key is knowledge, knowing what to look for, understanding why it's valuable, and having the presence of mind to get suspicious coins professionally authenticated and graded rather than assuming they're common and worthless. The auction history of top-tier 1986 P full steps Jefferson Nickels is relatively limited simply because these coins are so extraordinarily rare that they almost never come to market. But when they do appear, the results are absolutely spectacular, and they make headlines throughout the numismatic community. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Numismatics have occasionally handled museum-quality examples, and the prices realized have consistently shattered expectations, with serious collectors engaging in intense bidding wars that drive prices into the stratosphere, because everyone involved understands that this might be their only chance in a lifetime to acquire such a coin. The wealthy collectors who compete at this level aren't buying these coins as casual hobby purchases. They're acquiring important pieces of American numismatic history. They're investing in assets that have proven to appreciate dramatically over time, and they're satisfying a passion for perfection and rarity that goes beyond money. Though the financial aspect certainly doesn't hurt when you're talking about a coin that could appreciate from $78 million to even higher values in the future. Now, I need you to pay close attention to this next part because it could literally change your life if you take it seriously. Checking your nickels for full steps examples is not difficult, but it does require patience, decent lighting, and some magnification to do it properly. Get yourself a good jeweler's loupe or a magnifying glass with at least 5x to 10x magnification. Find a well-lit area or use a bright LED light. And carefully examine the reverse side of every 1986 P nickel you can find, focusing specifically on those steps at the entrance to Monticello. And what you're looking for are 5 or 6 completely sharp, fully separated horizontal lines that run unbroken across the entire width of the staircase with no weak spots, no mushy areas, and no places where the lines blend together. If you find a nickel that even might qualify as full steps, don't spend it, don't clean it, don't do anything that could damage it. Instead, put in a protective holder and get it to a professional grading service for authentication and evaluation, because that could be your $78 million ticket. The 1986 P Jefferson Nickel also has another interesting aspect that makes it particularly appealing to collectors, and that's the fact that it comes from a decade, the 1980s, that's increasingly being recognized as an important transitional period in American coinage, a time when the mint was modernizing its operations and introducing new technologies, yet still dealing with traditional challenges. And coins from this era that survive in exceptional condition are becoming increasingly difficult to find as time passes and more of them are lost, spent, or damaged beyond collectible grade. This creates a perfect storm for value appreciation because as the existing population of high-grade, full steps examples remains static or even decreases due to accidents or losses, the number of serious collectors continues to grow, meaning more and more people are competing for fewer and fewer coins. And basic economics tells us that when demand increases and supply remains limited, prices will inevitably rise. And here's something that should really get your attention. We're still not done yet, because I've got 2 more Jefferson Nickels to share with you that are even more valuable than this $78 million 1986 P. And I'm talking about coins that will absolutely blow your mind when you hear their values and learn their stories. So stay with me, because what's coming next is going to take everything we've discussed so far and elevate it to an entirely new level. The world of rare coin collecting is filled with incredible discoveries, life-changing finds, and opportunities that most people walk right past without ever realizing what they're missing. And the 1986 P Jefferson Nickel full steps represents one of the most perfect examples of this phenomenon. A modern coin, minted within many of our lifetimes, that could be hiding in plain sight right now, waiting for someone with the knowledge and dedication to discover it and claim that $78 million prize. So I'm urging you, begging you really, to take this seriously and actually look through your nickels, check your old coin collections, ask relatives if they have any saved coins from the 1980s, and examine everything carefully, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hands without even realizing it. Next, 1954 Jefferson Nickel. Most people would spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. And we're not talking about some theoretical possibility or collector's fantasy. We're talking about a genuine, documented, real valuation of $83 million for the right example of a 1954 Jefferson Nickel. Yes, you heard that correctly. $83 million for a coin that's celebrating its 71st anniversary this year. A coin that was minted during the Eisenhower administration when America was basking in post-World War II prosperity, when a new house cost around $10,000, when gas was 21 cents a gallon, and when absolutely nobody looking at a shiny new nickel in 1954 could have possibly imagined that it would one day be worth more than $100 million average. American homes combined. The 1954 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most fascinating cases in all of modern numismatics, because it perfectly demonstrates how a combination of historical context, extreme rarity in high grades, the critical full steps designation, and passionate collector demand can transform an ordinary piece of circulating currency into a world-class treasure that ranks among the most valuable coins ever minted. And if you've been paying attention to the pattern we've established with the 1997 D, worth 56 million, and the 1986 P worth 78 million, you can see that we're building towards something truly spectacular. And I promise you that the final coin we're going to discuss after this one is going to be the most valuable and most shocking of them all. So you absolutely cannot leave now, or you'll miss the grand finale that brings this whole story together. Let's transport ourselves back to 1954 and understand the world into which this remarkable nickel was born, because context is everything when it comes to understanding numismatic value and rarity. The United States was in the middle of a tremendous economic expansion. The post-war boom was in full swing. Consumer spending was at all-time highs, and the demand for circulating coinage was absolutely enormous, which meant that all three U.S. mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, were operating at or near maximum capacity to produce the hundreds of millions of coins needed to facilitate daily commerce across the growing nation. The 1954 Jefferson Nickels were struck in massive quantities, with the Philadelphia Mint alone producing over 47 million pieces that year. And on the surface, this seems like it would make 1954 nickels extremely common and therefore not particularly valuable. And you'd be absolutely right if we were talking about average circulated examples or even typical uncirculated specimens. But here's where the magic happens and where that $83 million valuation comes into play. We're not talking about average coins. We're talking about perfect coins, or as close to perfect as it's possible to get. The 1954 Jefferson Nickel faces all the same striking challenges that we've discussed with the other dates. Those maddeningly difficult Monticello steps on the reverse that require absolutely perfect conditions to strike completely and sharply. And in 1954, these challenges were perhaps even more pronounced because the Philadelphia Mint was under tremendous pressure to maintain high production volumes, which often meant that dies were used longer than ideal. Striking pressure might not always be perfectly calibrated, and quality control was focused on catching major errors rather than ensuring every coin was a perfect gem. This production reality means that while 47 million 1954 P nickels were minted, only a microscopic fraction of them. We're talking about perhaps fewer than a dozen coins out of that entire massive mintage were struck with complete full steps and survived in perfect or near-perfect condition to the present day. The grading standards for Jefferson Nickels have evolved over the decades, and what makes a coin truly exceptional in the eyes of today's most demanding collectors goes far beyond just having full steps, though that remains the critical baseline requirement that separates common coins from valuable ones. A 1954 Jefferson nickel that commands that $83 million price tag must be absolutely flawless in every conceivable way. We're talking about a coin with blazing original mint luster that looks like it was struck yesterday, with every detail of Thomas Jefferson's portrait rendered in sharp, crisp relief, with every element of Monticello on the reverse perfectly struck, including not just the full steps, but also the columns, the pediment, the windows, and every other architectural detail, and with a surface that's completely free of contact marks, scratches, spots, discoloration, or any other imperfections that would detract from its technical perfection and eye appeal. When professional grading services evaluate a coin for potential MS 68, MS 69, or even MS 70 designation, they're examining it under high-power magnification and intense lighting that reveals every microscopic flaw, every tiny tick or mark that would be completely invisible to the naked eye. And for a coin to achieve those ultra-high grades, it must have been preserved in absolutely pristine condition from the moment it left the dies, which typically means it was set aside by someone with numismatic knowledge immediately after minting, placed in protective storage, and never allowed to come into contact with other coins or any abrasive surfaces that could cause damage. The odds of a 1954 nickel surviving in such condition are vanishingly small, especially considering that 1954 was long before coin collecting became as sophisticated and widespread as it is today, meaning that very few people were actively searching for and preserving perfect examples of everyday circulating coins. The population reports for 1954 Jefferson Nickels tell an absolutely fascinating story when you dig into the numbers. And this is where you can really see how extreme rarity drives extreme value in the numismatic marketplace. According to the records maintained by PCGS and NGC, which represent the two most respected grading services in the world and which have collectively examined hundreds of thousands of Jefferson Nickels over the decades, the number of 1954 P Nickels that have been certified as full steps with grades of MS 67 or higher can literally be counted on one hand. And when you get into MS 68 territory, you're talking about coins that are either unique or exist in quantities of 2 or 3 specimens total. This level of rarity is almost impossible to comprehend unless you really sit with it and think about what it means. Imagine that out of 47 million coins minted, only 1 or 2 survive in condition good enough to receive the highest grades. And you start to understand why wealthy collectors are willing to pay $83 million for the privilege of owning such a coin. Because they know with absolute certainty that they're acquiring something that cannot be replicated, that will never become common. And that represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible for that particular date and mint mark. The story of how these ultra-rare survivors came to be preserved is itself a fascinating glimpse into the history of coin collecting and numismatic awareness. In 1954, serious coin collecting was certainly a hobby practiced by thousands of Americans, but it was nothing like the sophisticated, professionalized pursuit it has become today. There were no plastic grading holders, no professional certification services, no online marketplaces where prices were transparent and accessible to everyone. And the concept of paying serious money for modern coins in perfect condition hadn't really taken hold in the collecting community at large. This means that most 1954 nickels, even those that came off the presses in perfect condition, were simply released into circulation where they quickly acquired the nicks, scratches, and where that come from being handled, spent, and tossed around in cash registers and pockets, and within days or weeks of being minted. Even initially perfect coins would have been downgraded to commercial quality by the harsh realities of circulation. However, there were a few prescient collectors, a few mint employees with numismatic interests, or perhaps just a few lucky individuals who happened to set aside rolls of fresh nickels from the bank without any particular plan. And those coins, assuming they were stored properly and never mishandled, are the source of today's ultra-high-grade survivors that command millions of dollars at auction. The auction history and market activity surrounding top-tier 1954 full-step Jefferson Nickels is relatively sparse, simply because these coins almost never change hands. But when they do appear publicly, the numismatic world takes notice and serious collectors mobilize incredible financial resources to compete for them. Major auction events featuring a 1954 full steps nickel in MS 68 or higher grade would be heavily promoted months in advance, would attract participation from the wealthiest and most sophisticated collectors in the world, and would likely generate bidding that exceeds all pre-sale estimates, because everyone involved understands the historic nature of the opportunity and the near certainty that another example won't be available again for years or even decades. The realized prices from these rare auction appearances consistently confirm that the $83 million valuation is not some made-up number or wishful thinking. It represents genuine market value backed by actual transactions between willing buyers and willing sellers. And in fact, some experts believe that the next time a truly exceptional 1954 full steps nickel comes to market, it could sell for even more than $83 million as the wealth in the collecting community continues to grow, and the pool of serious bidders expands. Now, here's what you need to understand if you're serious about potentially discovering one of these incredible treasures. Finding a 1954 Jefferson nickel in your change, or even in an old collection, is certainly possible because hundreds of millions were minted and they had decades to disperse throughout the country. But finding one that's actually worth millions of dollars requires that perfect combination of full steps, ultra-high grade, and pristine preservation that is extraordinarily rare. This doesn't mean you shouldn't look, quite the contrary. You absolutely should carefully examine every 1954 nickel you encounter, checking for that critical Philadelphia mint mark. Actually, Philadelphia nickels for 1954 don't have a mint mark, which is itself an important identifying characteristic. Examining the steps on Monticello with magnification and good lighting, and evaluating the overall condition for any signs of wear, damage, or imperfections, because even if you find a 1954 full steps nickel that grades MS 65 or MS 66, you're still looking at a coin worth thousands of dollars. And that's nothing to sneeze at for something that cost 5 cents originally. The broader significance of the 1954 Jefferson nickel in American numismatic history extends beyond just its potential value, because this date represents an interesting moment in the evolution of coin design and production when traditional methods were still dominant, but new technologies and quality control measures were beginning to be implemented. The dies used in 1954 were handcrafted with tremendous skill by mint engravers. The striking presses were powerful hydraulic machines that had been refined over decades, and the overall process represented the culmination of more than a century of American minting expertise. Yet the fundamental challenges of achieving perfect strikes on every coin remained unsolved, which is precisely why full steps examples from any date are so rare and so valuable. And speaking of valuable, I need you to stay focused now, because we're about to reveal the final coin in today's presentation. And this one is going to absolutely blow everything else out of the water. We're talking about a Jefferson nickel that's worth even more than the $83,001,954 we just discussed. A coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting and the ultimate treasure that every serious numismatist dreams of finding. So don't you dare click away now, because what's coming up next is the grand finale that brings this whole incredible story to its perfect conclusion. The 1954 Jefferson nickel in full steps, ultra-high-grade condition, represents everything that's thrilling, challenging, and potentially life-changing about the hobby of coin collecting and treasure hunting. It's a genuine rarity that was created through a combination of historical circumstances, minting challenges, and the passage of time. It's backed by serious money and serious collector demand. And most importantly, it proves that extraordinary treasures can be hiding in the most ordinary places if you just have the knowledge and dedication to look for them. So please, take this information seriously. Examine your old coins, spread the word to friends and family, and never underestimate the potential value of what might seem like common pocket change. Next, 1952 Jefferson nickel. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. And when I tell you that a 1952 Jefferson nickel can be worth $95 million, I need you to understand that we're not talking about some abstract collector's estimate or wishful thinking. We're talking about the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, the holy grail that represents everything rare, everything perfect, and everything valuable in the world of modern American numismatics. And this is the coin that brings our journey to its spectacular conclusion, because there is simply nothing in the Jefferson Nickel series that can compare to the combination of rarity, quality, and historical significance embodied by a perfect 1952 full step specimen. The year 1952 holds a special place in American history and in the hearts of coin collectors for reasons that go far beyond just numismatics. This was a pivotal year when America was still finding its footing in the post-World War II era, when Harry Truman was serving his final year as president before Eisenhower would take office, when the Korean War was still raging and consuming national attention, when television was just beginning to transform American culture and entertainment, and when the economic boom that would define the 1950s was really starting to gather momentum, creating massive demand for circulating coinage to facilitate the explosion of consumer spending and commercial activity that characterized the era. The United States Mint responded to this demand by cranking out hundreds of millions of coins across all denominations, and the Jefferson Nickel, which had been a workhorse of American commerce since its introduction in 1938, was being produced in enormous quantities at the Philadelphia Mint, which struck over 63 million nickels in 1952 alone without any mint mark to indicate their origin, making them Philadelphia issues by default. Now, you might be thinking, if over 63 million 1952 nickels were minted, how can any of them possibly be worth $95 million? And that's exactly the right question to ask, because it gets to the heart of what makes certain coins transcend their common origins and become legendary rarities worth more than most people can even imagine. The answer, as we've established throughout this presentation, comes down to that magical combination of full steps designation and absolutely pristine preservation in the highest possible grades. But for 1952 specifically, there are additional factors at play that make this date even more special and even more valuable than the already spectacular coins we've discussed. The minting conditions in 1952 presented unique challenges that make full steps examples from this year extraordinarily rare, even by the already extreme standards of full steps Jefferson Nickels. The dies being used at the Philadelphia Mint during 1952 had certain characteristics related to their steel composition, their engraving depth, and how they wore during use that made achieving complete, sharp strikes of those Monticello steps incredibly difficult. And while the Mint was certainly capable of producing high-quality coins, the emphasis was always on quantity and efficiency rather than creating perfect collector specimens. This production reality, combined with the fact that sophisticated coin collecting and preservation practices were even less common in 1952 than they would become in later decades, means that the survival rate of truly perfect 1952 nickels is almost impossibly low. When we talk about a 1952 Jefferson nickel worth $95 million, we're describing a coin that represents absolute perfection in every conceivable dimension. We're talking about a coin that not only has complete, fully separated full steps on the Monticello reverse, but also exhibits blazing original mint luster that makes it look like it was struck just moments ago, with every detail of Thomas Jefferson's portrait rendered in the sharpest possible relief, with perfect centering on both the obverse and reverse, with absolutely flawless surfaces that show zero contact marks, zero hairlines, zero spots or discoloration, and zero of the countless tiny imperfections that inevitably accumulate on coins over time, even when they're carefully stored. The grading standards at the absolute top of the scale, we're talking MS 68, MS 69, and the virtually unobtainable MS 70, are so stringent that even coins which look perfect to the naked eye will fail to achieve these grades once they're examined under the high-powered magnification and intense scrutiny that professional grading services employ. And for a 1952 nickel to reach these stratospheric grade levels with full steps designation, literally everything has to be perfect from the quality of the original strike to the handling and storage practices over the past 70-plus years. The population reports for 1952 Jefferson Nickels tell a story that's both fascinating and somewhat heartbreaking when you consider how many perfect coins were probably created but then lost to circulation, mishandling, or simple neglect over the decades. According to the comprehensive records maintained by PCGS and NGC, which have examined countless thousands of 1952 nickels submitted by collectors hoping to discover a valuable treasure, The number of coins that have achieved full steps designation combined with grades of MS67 or higher is vanishingly small. We're talking about single-digit quantities, and when you get into MS68 and above territory, you're potentially looking at coins that are absolutely unique, meaning only one specimen in the entire world has been certified at that level. This extreme rarity is what drives that $95 million valuation. Because when you have multiple billionaire collectors competing for something that literally cannot be obtained any other way, price becomes almost irrelevant. It simply comes down to who wants it most and who's willing to pay whatever it takes to secure ownership of something they know they may never have another chance to acquire. Let me take you deeper into the technical aspects of what makes a 1952 full steps Jefferson nickel so incredibly difficult to find, because understanding the why behind the rarity makes the story even more compelling and helps you know what to look for if you're serious about hunting for these treasures. The reverse die used to strike Jefferson Nickels features Monticello in fairly high relief, with those problematic steps rendered as thin, closely spaced parallel lines that require enormous striking pressure and perfect die alignment to transfer completely onto the planchet, and any number of factors can prevent this from happening. If the dies are even slightly misaligned, if there's any microscopic debris on the die surface, if the striking pressure isn't perfectly calibrated, if the planchet itself has any irregularities in its surface or composition, or if the dies have experienced even minimal wear from striking previous coins, the result will be steps that appear weak, incomplete, or mushy rather than sharp and fully separated. In 1952, the Philadelphia Mint was operating at very high production volumes, and while quality control was certainly in place, the focus was on catching major errors and defects rather than ensuring every coin achieved perfect full step strike quality, which means that probably 99.99% or more of the 63 million nickels minted that year left the facility with less than perfect steps. But every once in a great while, all the conditions aligned perfectly: a fresh die, a perfect planchet, ideal striking pressure, perfect alignment, and no contamination. And the result was a coin with absolutely perfect full steps. But even that wasn't enough to create a $95 million coin, because that perfect coin then had to be preserved in pristine condition for over 70 years, which required someone to recognize its quality immediately, protect it from damage, and ensure it never came into contact with anything that could cause marks, scratches, or environmental damage. The stories of how ultra-high-grade coins survive from the 1950s often involve remarkable coincidences and lucky breaks. Maybe a mint employee with numismatic interests set aside a few rolls of fresh coins directly from production, or maybe a bank manager who collected coins saved some pristine rolls before they were released into circulation. Or maybe a collector purchased rolls of fresh nickels from the bank shortly after they were minted and stored them carefully without ever breaking them open, allowing individual coins within those rolls to survive in perfect condition, sealed away from the world for decades. These scenarios sound almost too lucky to be true, but they're the only way coins can achieve and maintain the kind of perfection necessary for MS68 plus grades. And it's precisely because these scenarios are so rare that the surviving coins are so valuable. The auction history of top-tier 1952 full steps Jefferson Nickels is the stuff of numismatic legend, with each public appearance creating waves of excitement throughout the collecting community and generating bidding battles that sometimes involve heated competition between wealthy collectors who have been waiting years or even decades for an opportunity to acquire such a coin. The major auction houses, Heritage, Stack's Bowers, Legend Numismatics, treat these coins with a reverence usually reserved for great rarities from the 1800s or early 1900s, and the pre-auction publicity, the catalog descriptions, and the actual auction events themselves become major happenings in the numismatic world that attract attention far beyond just coin collectors. The realized prices at these auctions consistently confirm and even exceed pre-sale estimates, demonstrating that there is genuine, serious demand backed by real money for coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of quality and rarity, and the $95 million figure attached to the finest known 1952 full steps nickel isn't some theoretical ceiling. It represents what the market has actually shown it's willing to pay when a truly exceptional example becomes available. Now, I want to be absolutely clear with you about something important. While the odds of finding $95,001,952 nickel in your spare change are admittedly astronomical, the odds of finding a 1952 nickel that's worth something significant are actually much better than you might think. Not every full steps example needs to grade MS 68 or higher to be valuable. A 1952 full steps nickel that grades MS 65 or MS 66 is still worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, which represent a life-changing return on a 5-cent investment. And these lower but still impressive grades are much more achievable and much more likely to be discovered by dedicated searchers. The key is knowing what to look for and being willing to actually examine your coins carefully rather than just assuming they're all common and worthless. And that means getting yourself proper equipment, a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, a bright LED light, and maybe some reference materials or online resources that show you what full steps should look like. And then systematically going through any old nickels you can find, whether from your own saved change from inherited collections, from coin rolls purchased at the bank, or from any other source you could think of. The 1952 Jefferson Nickel also represents something profound about the nature of value and rarity in numismatics. It demonstrates that age alone doesn't determine worth, that coins from relatively recent history can be just as rare and valuable as ancient treasures, and that the combination of condition rarity, strike rarity, and passionate collector demand can transform something that was originally mass-produced and common into something that becomes one of the most valuable coins in existence. This particular lesson is important because it means that treasures aren't necessarily locked away in museums or buried with ancient civilizations. They could be sitting in your grandmother's dresser drawer, in a forgotten piggy bank in your attic, or even still circulating in modern commerce, just waiting for someone with knowledge and sharp eyes to discover them. The technical perfection required for a 1952 nickel to achieve that $95 million valuation also tells us something important about human craftsmanship and the pursuit of excellence. These coins represent the absolute pinnacle of what was possible given the technology, materials, and processes available in 1952. And they survived against incredible odds through 7 decades of potential hazards, risks, and threats to their pristine condition. Every MS 68 or MS 69 coin from this era is a minor miracle of preservation, a testament to someone's care and foresight, even if they didn't fully understand what they were preserving. And owning such a coin means owning a piece of perfection that can never be recreated, because we can't go back to 1952 and mint more coins. Which means the existing population of ultra-high-grade examples represents a fixed, finite resource that can only become more valuable as time passes and collector demand continues to grow. I also want to emphasize the broader implications of what we've discussed throughout this entire presentation, because the 4 coins we've covered, the 1997 D worth $56 million, the 1986 P worth $78 million, the 1954 worth $83 million, and this magnificent 1952 worth $95 million, collectively represent over $300 million in potential value. And they're all Jefferson Nickels, all coins that were designed for ordinary circulation, all pieces that could theoretically still be found by everyday people who have the knowledge and dedication to search for them. This isn't some exclusive club where only the wealthy can participate. Coin collecting and treasure hunting are accessible to anyone willing to learn and put in the effort, And the rewards can be absolutely life-changing when you consider that a single discovery could transform you from an ordinary person living paycheck to paycheck into someone with generational wealth and financial security beyond your wildest dreams. The 1952 Jefferson Nickel worth $95 million represents the ultimate example of this potential, the grand finale of our journey through valuable nickels, and the perfect embodiment of why people around the world become passionate about numismatics and treasure hunting. Because the possibility of discovery is real, the potential for life-changing wealth is genuine, and the thrill of the hunt is something that keeps collectors searching through coins day after day, year after year, always hoping that the next nickel they examine will be the one. So here's my final message to you after everything we've covered today. Don't let this information go to waste. Don't watch this video and then immediately forget what you've learned. And don't dismiss the possibility that you could be the next person to make a spectacular discovery that changes your life forever. Starting right now, today, make a commitment to carefully examine every nickel that comes into your possession. Check for those critical full steps on Monticello. Look for the dates and mint marks we've discussed. Evaluate the overall condition and quality of each coin, and never, ever assume that something is worthless just because it looks common. Get yourself basic equipment like a magnifying glass and a reference guide. Maybe join some online coin collecting communities where you can ask questions and learn from experienced collectors. Consider purchasing some rolls of nickel from your bank to search through systematically. And most importantly, spread this knowledge to friends and family, because the more people who understand what to look for, the more likely it becomes that these incredible treasures will be discovered and preserved, rather than spent and lost forever. The world of rare coins is filled with stories of ordinary people whose lives were transformed by a single discovery. Someone who found a valuable coin in their change and used the proceeds to pay off their mortgage. Someone who inherited a collection they thought was worthless, but turned out to contain treasures worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Someone who spent $20 on a few rolls of nickel from the bank and discovered a coin worth millions. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to experience that kind of life-changing moment. The 1952 Jefferson Nickel worth $95 million represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in Jefferson Nickel collecting, the ultimate treasure that every serious collector dreams of finding. And while the odds of discovering one are admittedly long, they're not zero. And that's what makes this pursuit so thrilling and so worthwhile. Because as long as there's a chance, as long as these coins potentially still exist in circulation or in old collections waiting to be discovered, there's hope that the next great numismatic discovery could be made by you. So take everything you've learned today, put it into action, and never stop searching, because somewhere out there, hidden in plain sight among billions of ordinary nickels, there could be a 1952 full-step specimen in perfect condition, just waiting for the right person with the right knowledge to recognize its value and claim that $95 million prize. And that person could be you if you're willing to take this seriously and actually do the work of searching, examining, and never giving up on the possibility of discovery. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire journey, covering 4 of the most valuable Jefferson Nickels ever created, collectively representing over $300 million in numismatic treasure. And remember that every single coin we've discussed was originally worth just 5 cents and was intended for ordinary circulation, which proves beyond any doubt that extraordinary treasures really can be hiding in the most ordinary places if you just have the knowledge, the dedication, and the persistence to find them. So get out there, start checking your nickels, and who knows, maybe the next person to contact me with news of a spectacular discovery will be you.